Hi everyone, welcome to this video on the Reflex Arcs lesson of the Human Body Part 2 scheme. This is the first in a sequence of 5 lessons at the end of Human Body Part 2. So the first set of lessons, 1 to 11, was on diseases, and certainly lessons 2 to 10 of those were all bound together by one single idea, this one thread that ran all the way through. Which was the idea of pathogens. So we've moved on from that part now, and we're putting it within the human body part 2, but actually, and it's important you're clear on this, and it's important your students are clear on this, what we're doing in this second, smaller part of human body part 2 is introducing a new big idea, one that students will come back to at GCSE when they study biology, and really it's this idea of homeostasis. So the first thing to do in this lesson is to just briefly give them an overview of what we mean by homeostasis. And it's this idea that the body has these kind of control systems which allow it to respond to its environment. So a change in the environment we call a stimulus. And I've tried to lay this out. I mean, this is very, very rudimentary, but I've tried to lay this out in a kind of schematic way just to give students a sense of what they'll be looking at in these 5 lessons. So there's some sort of change in the environment which we call a stimulus, and as we will see, there are things in the body which detect stimuli. They allow the body to kind of coordinate a response. Now that message, that's when a stimulus is detected, a message is sent to what's called the central nervous system. So central nervous system has 2 parts, and you can give this overview to students. The one part is the brain, the second part is the spinal cord. And then that sends a message somewhere else in the body to effect a response. So the body is going to respond to the fact that there was a change in the environment. Now, I've tried to organize this just in a way to give students a sense of how the subsequent lessons fit together, and you may wish to come back to this diagram if you draw something similar. But there's 2 options here. One is that we get a conscious response. So that would be you notice something, you think about what you're going to do, and then you respond consciously. What we're more interested in at GCSE typically tends to be these kind of reflex or unconscious responses. So what are these unconscious or reflex responses that are coordinated by the spinal cord? Well, one option is, and this is what we're going to look at today, is that the muscles respond. So as we'll see in the next part of this video, in the second part of this lesson, the muscles can move to essentially avoid danger or avoid pain or whatever. Then the other option, and this will come especially when we look at insulin and diabetes and so on, is that the spinal cord can trigger glands to release hormones, and they will kind of keep certain levels of certain things, whether it's water concentration in the blood or the temperature of the body, or as we'll look in lots of detail, the glucose concentration in the blood. Hormones can keep those things balanced. But the main thing for you to keep emphasizing through this series of lessons is this idea of stimulus and response. Something changes, how does the body respond? And what we're interested in is not necessarily the obvious conscious ones, it's the things that are going on beneath the surface. So in this lesson, which is on reflex arcs, we're looking in particular at the kind of examples where your response is some sort of movement. It's the muscles contracting to move. And I started off drawing this diagram, but I thought actually it could be quite helpful for me to go through this kind of step by step. So the example that's in the slides, it's taken from a GCSE question, and I think that's absolutely fine. At this stage, our role as teachers, given this is a Key Stage 3 lesson, is just to give students an overview. And actually, they'll practice this in more depth when they get to year 10 and 11. But for now, remember what the aim of this lesson is. It's to introduce this idea of stimulus and response. So if they don't get all of it and all the language right, don't worry too much, as long as they've got this sense that some change is detected and the body reacts or responds accordingly. So in this case, the change is touching a sharp object, a pin or something like that. And what I've done here is I've drawn a little stick person. This is a concrete event. I've drawn it as a stick person. And then I'm going to zoom in and see how scientists explain this using their abstract models. So the concrete event, the first concrete event, is that the person touches the sharp object. If I zoom in on here, well, that sharp object I'm going to call a stimulus. So this is an example of a stimulus, a change in the environment, something that our body needs to be aware of. And I've tried to show here this detection by the receptor cells in the person's fingertip. So the first thing that happens is the receptor cells detect this stimulus. So I might put a number 1 over here, which is referring to these two bits, because what I'm going to be doing is using these diagrams to scaffold students' thinking. And ultimately, we want them to be able to write it in a really clear, logical way. And the diagram can be really helpful there. So when the receptor cells detect the stimulus, the next thing that happens, and I'm going to use a ruler to draw this, the next thing that happens is that they send a signal. So a signal travels, an electrical signal, through these long specialized cells called neurons, which they'll study in more detail when they get to GCSE. A signal is sent along the sensory neuron to the spinal cord. And I'll just sketch the spinal cord like this, something like this. So this is the spine, and all these incredibly complex nerve fibers and things going on inside the spinal cord. But this is the second part that we need to emphasize. And remember, we're telling a story here. We're using these diagrams to tell a story, to give students a sense of the overall journey of this reflex arc. So the receptor cells detect stimulus. My number 2 is that an electrical signal, and again, you may wish to write electrical signal depending on your class. I'm not going to do it here. What I am going to emphasize is that this long nerve cell here, and later on at GCSE they're going to zoom in on nerve cells and see what they mean, but right now I'm just giving them this idea that there's a kind of electrical cable thing in their body, because it is key stage 3. I don't need to go into loads of detail about what they call axons, dendrites, all of that business. I'm just going to say, look, there's this long it's kind of like a cable inside our body called a sensory neuron. And the electrical signal travels from the receptor cell to the spinal cord. And again, this is a reflex response. It's an automatic response. So it's not going to go to the brain, it's going to go to the spinal cord. Now, what you can say in here is that inside this part here, there is what we call a relay neuron. So I'm going to say inside here there's a relay neuron. Now in a subsequent lesson we're going to look at synapses and things like that. In this lesson this is just an overview, so we don't need to worry too much about synapses and things like that. We can just say the next stage, and this is number 3, is that inside the spinal cord there's the message travels along a relay neuron. What students need to understand is that the relay neuron is the one that sends the message from the receptor to the right place in the body to coordinate the response. So that's what we're going to look at next, because then this electrical signal is sent to where it needs to respond, which in this case is the muscles. So I might put here, I'll just put here, and I'll kind of shade this as muscles. I mean, obviously it would be the biceps as well, but I don't want to overcomplicate my diagram. So then I'm going to say an electrical signal goes this way. Now, what sends that signal from the relay neuron inside the spinal cord to the muscle, so let's label this as muscle here, is what's called the motor neuron. And again, students just need to understand, I mean, this is a nerve cell, this is a long, thin nerve cell which transmits electrical signals. For now, students just need to be familiar with the idea that it's kind of like a cable that sends electrical signals from place to place inside the body. And then the final stage is that this muscle, where the electrical signal has been sent, carries out a response. Now, this is where, in these diagrams, it's good to go from concrete to abstract and back to concrete again. So what we can say is here, well, this muscle contracts. I might put in here, contracts. The outcome being, the person makes a response. So then I can draw the person again. I can draw that arm up there again like that. And this looks like this. I can draw the person's fingers like that. And the sharp object is now down here, away from where the person's hand is. And maybe I'll do some little lines to show that they've gone like that. When you touch the sharp object, without even thinking about it, your arm moves away. This would be then number 5. This movement here would be the response. So in fact, that really is number 5, but we could say that's number 5 as well. The muscle contracts to move the arm away. And what students need to know is that that is called the response. They should be able to identify the stimulus was the sharp object. All of this stuff happened inside our body, but then the response to that was how the movement that we made, again, something concrete, and that's what they need to be able to distinguish. Now there's other examples, or I think I've just put one more example in this lesson for Key Stage 3, which is touching something hot, exactly the same process. What we'll look at in subsequent lessons is we'll look at this system in greater detail.